Okay, today we're going to talk a little bit about doing legal research for a legal research paper that would be appropriate at the graduate level. Um, I'm going to assume that everyone is familiar with how to access and log into LexisNexis Academic. Once you have successfully logged in and you're at the LexisNexis Academic screen, this is where the large majority of your research will begin. Before you begin your search, you will want to have a U.S. Supreme Court case. For a publishable legal paper, I think it would be best to choose a U.S. Supreme Court case which is relatively recent. For example, it might be a good idea to select a 2003, 2005, maybe even a 2006 case. Select a case which genuinely interests you, since you will be writing about this topic in quite some detail. And once you have chosen a case, you will be looking at lower federal appellate cases that have been decided since the U.S. Supreme Court case. And for your paper, you will be analyzing these federal appellate cases, describing general trends since the U.S. Supreme Court case. Let me give you an example. I have made a research article available. The article's titled Canine Sniffs and Policing the Drug War by a colleague and friend of mine, Dr. Durant Franzen, who is a professor at Texas A&M University, San Antonio. Dr. Franzen chose to write an article around the 2005 U.S. Supreme Court case, Illinois versus Cabales. Feel free to stop this lecture for a moment and download the Canine Sniffs article. Take a look at the methodology section and you will see how Franzen shepherdized this case. So pause this presentation and look at page 5 of Franzen's article, specifically the methods section. Once you have viewed this, then come back to the presentation. Okay, hopefully by now you have an understanding of what this legal paper will consist of. Again, basically, I want you to select a U.S. Supreme Court case, preferably one that is relatively recent, and then look at subsequent federal appellate cases. The goal of your paper will be to essentially describe what federal appellate courts have been doing since the U.S. Supreme Court case. Ideally, you should be able to predict what implications these decisions may have for this topic in the future. You might also notice areas where there seem to be discrepancies between federal appellate courts. This is very important. If this is the case, it would be wise to put these discrepancies out in the analysis section of your paper, where you can discuss these in more detail. You will, of course, need to read not only the initial U.S. Supreme Court case that you choose to write about, but also these subsequent federal appellate court cases, which are going to be the interpretation and analysis section of your paper. So you may be asking yourself, how do I shepherdize a case? Well, the good news is this is fairly easy. Look at your introductory page of the LexisNexis Academic when you're logged in. This is what would have opened up automatically. Now, under the General Searching column, click on U.S. Legal. This is in one of the blue boxes. Once you have clicked on this, more choices will open up, and you should see the choice that says Shepherd Citations. So now go ahead and click on this. Once you have done this, you will be asked to enter the citation. Just enter the citation. In other words, do not worry about entering the name of the case. So be sure you have the citation prior to shepherdizing a case. And if you will notice from reading Franzen's paper, the case that he uses, which is Illinois versus Cabales, it has the citation of 543 U.S. Make sure you have periods after the U and the S, and then 405. So just to see what would happen, you may want to enter this citation. So go ahead and do this, and then hit the check icon afterward. Okay, you will notice that there are quite a few returns. First, LexisNexis provides the prior history for the case. This is important, and I would suggest that you familiarize yourself with cases which came before the one that you were investigating. In fact, it is often a good idea to include a history of relevant cases leading up to the case you are investigating, and you can do this in the literature review section of your paper. So stop this presentation for a moment and again refer to Franzen's article. You will notice that in the literature review section, as well as the subsequent sections, the author provides the reader with a history of cases leading up to Illinois versus Caballes. This is an example of what I would like to see in your literature review. So again, feel free to pause the presentation and examine this aspect of Franzen's article. Once you have looked at the cases which led up to the one you are examining, you will then want to pay attention to those federal appellate court cases which cite the U.S. Supreme Court cases you are analyzing. Remember, there are 11 federal appellate courts which are called circuits. So for example, you could look at appellate courts in the First Circuit, the Second Circuit, the Third Circuit, and so on. And there are 11 circuits, and in addition to these 11 circuits, though, you will also want to consider cases belonging to the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals. So really there are 12 circuits to look at total. And remember, only look at the federal appellate court cases. Don't worry about the district court cases. Okay, so now it is time to narrow the cases down even more. This is where you will want to use appropriate terms. You must, of course, be familiar with your case enough to know which terms are the best to include in your search. In Franzen's article, which deals with the constitutionality of using canines to sniff for drugs, the author mentions on page 5 that he used the words canine, dog, and police to narrow down the cases considerably. It is important to note that this decision was somewhat arbitrary. Franzen, as the author of the paper, made the decision of which search terms to use the same way that you, as the author of your paper, will decide which terms to use. The terms should make sense and also include key aspects of the U.S. Supreme Court case which you are investigating. Once again, pause this presentation and take a look at page 5 of Franzen's article. Okay, now let's continue shepherdizing the case. Again, we are wanting to narrow down the federal appellate cases which came after Illinois versus Caballes. And just to show you how Franzen narrowed these cases down even further, let's examine only those cases which have the terms canine, dog, and police. To do this, look at the upper left-hand corner of your screen, where it says Restrict By. Now click on Narrow Restrict By, which is one of the options. This will then take you to a new screen. Notice on the right-hand side there is a window which says Search Within Results Terms. Go ahead and put these terms in the small window. It is very important that you put each word in quotation marks. You must also write the word "and" in between each word. So in the box using Franzen's search terms, be sure that you put canine, dog, and policing. Also under jurisdictions, check the federal boxes. Click on 1 through the 11th Circuit and the D.C. Circuit. And once you have done this, click on the red box at the top which says Apply. Again, this is the instructions that I just gave. You can look at them again if you need to. Feel free to back this presentation up if it helps. Okay, you will notice that you still have quite a few cases which have been returned. But remember, you are only interested in examining the federal appellate courts. Those are the cases that you want. Don't worry about the U.S. district courts for this legal paper. So basically, you will want to look only at cases that are federal appellate court cases in the First Circuit Court of Appeals, the Second Circuit Court of Appeals, and so forth. And you may notice that a particular circuit may not have any relevant Court of Appeals decisions. That's okay. Just go to the next circuit. Remember, only spend time reviewing Federal Court of Appeals cases that meet your search criteria, and do not forget to include the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals. In total, there will be 11 circuits to look at. So in a nutshell, that is how you should write a legal research paper of this nature. Not every case that you read will be relevant to the discussion, and not every case that comes up will be included in your analysis. And you don't have to include every single case. It's not expected. Having said that, though, if a federal appellate case includes your search terms and is relevant, you should probably include it. And after having watched this presentation, be sure to closely read Franzen's article. You will probably appreciate this methodology, and if you closely follow his outline using a case which you have selected, you should be on the right track. And as you pick your U.S. Supreme Court case, which will essentially be your starting point, think about topics you are generally interested in. Remember, you will spend the semester writing this legal paper, so try to select a topic which you will enjoy reading about and researching. Good luck, and I'm always available should you have any further questions.